like playing these roles, and if so, why? Could we start with that, maybe? Do you like playing Creon? This quite...
very powerful. Yeah, not a nice person to play, but the power was really interesting to play with. But yeah, not a nice character. However, when we were rehearsing, this is just such a great play. It just reminded me what a great play it is. Obviously, I've taught it and I have directed it myself a couple of times, but actually doing it again, I was just like, this is just a great play. It's just got so much meat in it. And in terms of his character development, he's kind of like this, and then that twist in the mid, sort of towards the end of the play, where he suddenly realises everything he's done has been a complete and utter disaster. That's quite a strong lesson to learn. And then the downfall's pretty quick after that. So that was interesting.
And what about playing it as a woman?
Although I didn't feel very feminine when I was playing it, to be honest. I felt I was trying to portray a male persona in a way. I can't think of many women who would not listen to the obvious things that were being said to them.
Maggie Thatcher?
That's the only person I can actually think about. But then Margaret Thatcher definitely framed herself as a male with a male persona. She, she had a handbag, but that was the only thing really. She was surviving in a male world as a female, but really a male figurehead. And I think that in the way that Creon is, just being completely dismissive of others' feelings. I mean, it's almost like a sociopath, really, in a way, that there's no understanding of an emotional response.
And with his link to Trump, didn't it?
Yeah.
Right, doing this performance.
Yeah,
how Trump was at the kind of the height, or just the election.
Yeah, how could anyone be so unconnected to the realities of life? Yeah, absolutely. Very Trump-esque.
Yeah, because a lot of the words you were speaking sounded as if they'd come out of a Trump interview earlier in the day.
Yeah, and the mannerisms as well.
Yeah,
that you put into it. It was very clever.
But the fact that it was 2,500 years old as well, I think really, I mean, that's what surprised us all the time, even if we know the play.
Yeah.
To hear those words coming out and reminding ourselves that is 2,500 years old, and there is
it still resonates.
It still works.
Yes, it really does resonate.
I think it was really interesting, I don't know if you found it, Daria, but doing the chorus, whereas the chorus would normally be this kind of body, that we were deciding, weren't we, on we started to develop characters with the chorus, and those of us who were going to agree with Creon,
because
and
in
those
classical Greek theatre, chorus, they were talking to the audience. So they were something separate from the other actors who were playing characters. So chorus would comment on what's going on and also give a moral lesson to the audience. But because we had this barrier between us and the audience because of the COVID time theatre, we couldn't be so engaged with the audience, right? So only option was to be engaged with the other characters. And we developed our chorus members. We were gossiping between ourselves. We were discussing what Creon has done, what Antigone is doing. We were taking sides. We were judgmental.
Feeling those moments when what he was doing, you could see that it was all going to go horribly wrong. And I know towards the end of the performance, that wonderful speech you do about the sword that hangs over his head, I was getting really emotional by the last, the nights of the performance, because it was such a powerful idea.
But and then it was like they were actually, in a way, it felt like they were kind of against. There wasn't a lot of it wasn't that they had turned, which was very interesting. It was very obvious that they had turned.
What about for you, Alice, with playing a character who would have been performed by a man in ancient Greek times? What was that like for you in terms of the language?
I think it was very interesting because I've seen a lot of modern adaptations of the play, and it seems like the women really take on the feminine role, but I wanted to kind of mix it up a bit. I wanted to kind of have different size and characteristics to her. And the first thing that I kind of thought of was like one of those like religious extremist people that are kind of preaching and everybody loves them and they're kind of falling at their feet and stuff. And I thought, yeah, I think that's kind of what Antigone is. And they're not all, flowery and nice and great, which is the big irony there. And I really feel that Creon and Antigone are both kind of two sides of evil, almost. Yeah. Like, she's not all great, he's not all great,
not at all.
She's not all bad, he's not all bad, kind of thing. So I really liked exploring that. And it was almost like two political parties, almost.
And with the pandemic, one of the discussions we had was about being more like somebody who breaks the COVID rules, wasn't it? I will go out and I will bury the body, despite the government mandate and restrictions.
Yeah, like Antigone was the face of the protests, She was the one that was not wearing masks, that sort of thing. But and in kind of the play sense, she was the one that was burying her brother because that was fair. Whereas, as we've seen in the world, people haven't been able to be at funerals and bury their loved ones, which is very sad. But she was like, no, I'm going to do it. I don't care what the government says. So that was very interesting to play that rebellious figure.
It was the elastic band, wasn't it? The two sides kind of pulling against.
But it is interesting though, because that kind of behaviour and response, in a way. So, for example, if we look at America, where the people are like, when they can't tell us what to do, everybody's sort of been pretty anti that response. But you don't feel that about Antigone. You actually kind of go, oh, actually, we are behind that kind of rebellion. So it's an interesting dichotomy there that Creon actually, the biggest issue, of course, is that he sets himself up before the gods. But in COVID times, actually, he is making the right decision.
And
we've gone back to the ancient way of looking at these two figures, because for many centuries it was the idea that Antigone is this great rebellion, that she's on the right, then she becomes a feminist icon, and now we've gone back to the more balanced and also maybe slightly more in favour of Creon at certain points.
I didn't really want everybody to like Antigone. I wanted there to be mixed opinions. For sure.
We left it quite open in terms of, as well, we talked about going in the direction of a Jacinda Ardern figure. We thought that's kind of an easy route to take. I mean, people could say the Trump route was very easy to take, but it was quite open for people to make that decision about whether the director and the actors were very left or very right. It was quite ambiguous as to what people felt at the end of the play.
And it's interesting because, Jackie and I taught the play and directed the play over years, different times. And we've often said to students, why is the play not called Creon? Why is it called Antigone? And then remembering that it was originally written by a man to be performed by men, what is it actually trying to say about women? Whereas nowadays, as you say, we tend to see her as this kind of feminist icon. But in fact, really, the ancient Greeks are perhaps showing that side, women are not to be trusted, women are not
and there's a beautiful irony for you guys as well, because it was, although I tried to set out and create a play that was 50-50 women and men, we ended up with 5 women in the play. Unfortunately, unfortunately, Maurice isn't here today, who played Art Ismani, but there was 5 women dominating the play, and one male of
and also what was hilarious was that Zach and Haman, he was the voice of reason in the play.
Haman is the voice.
He's the voice of reason, and he was the only man in the show.
But one of the things we also talked about is that actually with the play, hubris is the downfall of every character. Everybody's pride is what causes their downfall, except for Teresa's, who's the only one who seems to disappear, and we never really find out about what happens to him. But certainly Eurydice, with her pride, she even says, we are bred to stoicism in this family.
And I think there's perhaps a lesson for the world, our pride, thinking that we're doing quite well, and then suddenly, the ancients would definitely have said that we were slapped down by the gods for hubris. So that's definitely something to think
as
about.
an irony in terms of during the COVID pandemic as well, pride is what becomes our downfall. You know, we talk about constantly, oh, you know, we haven't had COVID, but of course a week after this production, we went into lockdown with the Valentine's Day lockdown.
Yes,
So.
yes, it was marvellous.
Ironically, speaking of pride, I'm proud of Eurydice. I mean, I don't agree with her and what she did. After all, she committed suicide. But I'm proud of her because she turned out to be the only person of action. While others were spending hours and hours talking, arguing, etc., she came in, she reassessed the situation, and she's gone. That's the only one person of action.
That's a really good point. She made her decision and that was it. And she didn't make a huge fanfare of it either. Whereas Creon, gets this moment of lamentation where he's centre stage, makes for great tragedy. She just gets on with the business.
Yeah, so she's a very strong character too.
Yeah, but it's interesting because her death is not lauded. I mean, it's literally mentioned in that last speech, and by the way, your wife's dead. I mean, it literally is a sort of, it's an afterthought. So in a way, it does sort of suggest, I mean, yes, she was a woman of action, but it does suggest to the Greeks of the time that basically women come and go.
Well, that was maybe intended.
And you can always find another wife. But if you make a bad decision in terms of the gods, that you can't come back from.
But Haman has that, Creon has that discussion with his son, doesn't he? He says there are other women, other fields to plough.
Other fields to plough, yes, absolutely, yeah.
How about the language then, the fact that we've chosen to
Don
stage
Taylor's
this particular
translation.
production and his translation that uses the plague, sickness, disease metaphors. I mean, how is that
and did you find it easy to memorize and to play, to perform?
Well, Jackie.
We all had different journeys.
Easy to memorise, yes. I think those of us slightly older in the cast, had a little bit more. Well, Jackie came in quite late to the production and learnt it really amazing. I mean, we were all so impressed. I probably struggled a bit more.
I don't know. I think
with sort of memory. I mean, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used Don Taylor translations before, and it's so alliterative. It's poetic. There's rhythm in it. And it just seems to flow because there's a lot of the original translations. Obviously, I think it's adaptation from a translation, but original translations, they sound a lot more like a Shakespearean performance. But this has its poetry, but it's understandable as well.
Anyone care to comment on the plague metaphor that Holly was asking about? Did you feel, oh my God, that's so I can so connect to this metaphor in the pandemic time?
I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was the concept of the bubble, with the audience being on one side, them seeing us not really seeing them, but also seeing them at the same time, and us focusing on what was going on inside our bubble, but not really thinking about anybody else, almost. I think that was quite clear to the audience and to us as well as actors, with us just, as Daria said earlier, just focusing on ourselves and what was going on with us and being very selfish, but not necessarily looking at the bigger picture for the nation, for the country, for the kingdom.
And there's a lot of that in the language, isn't there? Because they talk, it's a lot of hive mind almost, and the only times that Creon really said people, we made that very specific thing to direct through the glass to the people. But otherwise there's this hive mind. I mean, it's no wonder it all goes tragically, because you're all in this internal bubble, not hearing the outside voices of the people, and your only connection really is that chorus. I mean, you're senators, but you still have that connection to the higher up.
I actually thought, in terms of acting it though, there was a definite feeling of safety within the bubble.
Yes.
Obviously, it's been a while since we got on the stage, and it was actually really nice. Having the barrier was actually really, there was a safety in it. I think that we could see each other, but you couldn't fully see the audience. I think if we hadn't had that, you'd have been able to fully see everybody. And I really like the fact that if you looked in the reflection, you actually, other actors were reflected in the bubble, which there was a sort of, I think there was a stronger ensemble feel as a result of that. And you didn't have to be looking at someone to be able to talk to them, which was also really, really nice. I thought that was great. And taking cues off people without actually having to see them, which you wouldn't be able to do without that, the perspex. But that there was a real statement there. I really liked the strength of it. It just felt stronger. Although I felt like I was talking a lot louder than maybe I was. Because I think it boomed back in it.
Similarly with an amphitheatre.
It resounded back, maybe.
And talking about space a little bit then, how was it for the actors who played the chorus and a character, given the fact that in ancient Greek times the chorus would have just been the chorus and there would have been those three actors playing just those characters? How was that to interchange between those characters and change your relationship with other characters on stage depending on what your character was as well? What did that feel like?
The
in space?
Tiresias role was much more straightforward because we'd given quite a good sized gap to go and be backstage because the preparing for the role was quite important because I mean there was the taking off of all that nice stuff and then the putting on of even the socks and the black lipstick and whatever, and just that kind of starting to transform. And then that long walk, because we had the changing room over here, we did actually quite a long walk down past that audience with our COVID line, so you kind of felt like you didn't want to be near.
But it was very Parados-esque almost. As though it was the ancient.
It was nice.
And you've got that time to kind of be, be in role and enter. There's one of the things I think I said to you, Holly, was that what I felt about how you directed it was that while it was modern, there was also the element of the Greek tragedy about it, that it was still had a level of stylization. And because often you'll see, like I think the National Theatre production was wonderful because we actually got to see it in London. It really does go for the realism. It's a very realistic performance.
And very modern.
The bunker where they got papers and they're doing their office. But this somehow was, yes, you in your boiler suit and wearing your modern Doc Martens, but there's something still very stylised about it, which I thought.
The stillness, I think, was really, the walk and the stillness was actually really, because we didn't wander about, there wasn't a lot of, it didn't feel that naturalistic, but it was really within its stylisation, it really felt centred.
What about you, Alice, because we talked about that funny moment that as you became the chorus member and Creon says out onto the mountain, as a chorus member you're running to your own death. So, what's that like as an outsider, knowing that we're all talking about Antigone, because we never see Antigone until when we reenacted that moment, but we don't see her for the last 3 or 4 scenes. We could have chosen not to have had that stylized scene, so...
Well, for me, I was hoping every night that there would be a suspension of disbelief, kind of with me putting on the coat and then, changing my physicality, changing my walk, changing the way I felt, the way I reacted to what was going on. I tried to kind of... Because as Antigone, I tried to kind of be more of a presence, whereas as a chorus member, I tried to kind of bring in my energy almost, so that I was not noticeable.
Softening it.
Exactly.
Yeah, blurring your edges.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was fun to do.
That's good. And also, I really love the scenes that they shot of you, using the multimedia and sort of giving us the death scene of Antigone.
Yeah.
How did it feel recording that?
Well, it definitely felt very real, as if that was happening because of the space that Holly chose to film it in.
In the bunker.
visual.
Yeah, pretty much. It was underneath her house. There was dust getting in my eyes, in my hair, everywhere. You know, it was quite slippery, and a lot of the reactions that you saw were real because like, I was blindfolded, literally. Like it was very claustrophobic and stuff. So that was a lot of fun to film.
It required you to be both a stage and a film actor, though, didn't it?
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, which is definitely in my real life what I'm juggling at the moment as well.
Which does give you a break as an actor to be able to see that, but there's something, I mean, as a director it was great, but as an audience member watching it back and seeing the eyes of each character was really quite powerful. And Daria, I mean, your one, particularly when we filmed it, that we had a, quite goosebumpy moment, didn't we, where you looked into the mirror, into the camera, not, looking at the camera, but through a mirror.
That was super eerie.
Yeah.
Yeah, super eerie. And as you said, it was challenging and fun for me to switch between my characters, because my chorus one is quite extroverted and ambitious and very pushy as this person can be in the position she's in, while Antigone was quite opposite. She's introverted, she's very solid, she's quiet and she keeps things to herself. So actually it was a bit challenging to play her because of that bubble that we mentioned six times.
Yes,
yeah.
You really see,
Yeah. Because of that bubble, those glasses, because I didn't want to raise my voice too much for this particular character, but on the other hand I had to project. So it was I had to balance that. So in that sense, playing the chorus character was much easier. But yeah, as Jane mentioned, we had this opportunity to walk away, completely change our outfit. I could switch between this formal black and white into screaming bright red, and yeah, that was really helpful too.
I think also as we developed the production as well, it also felt very much that Daria was the courageous, was the leading chorus.
The leader of the chorus.
Yeah, the leading chorus member, because you spent the most time on stage as the chorus member. There was a lot more breaks that the other actors could take off stage and taking other characters off and coming on as other characters, that your chorus member became the courageous. You were the leading chorus member, which was interesting as a character to see how you responded to Creon.
Yeah,
There was some turning, wasn't there? There was some moments where you were with him and some moments you were against him.
There was an evolution. Like in the beginning, my member was like, okay, this Creon, our new king, is kind of dodgy, but keep smile. All good. I'll go with that. And so was also a bit ass-licking. Yeah, but then she changed her attitude completely towards the end, and in the end she was very against Creon and very judgmental about it.
But also as a senator, as Don Taylor has translated it to, we could see a lot of political figures who were very similar, like with Trump, being on the side of Trump, and then obviously once Trump was out, think of your Ted Cruz's and Mitch McConnell's who kind of jumped ship that moment that Trump was out. And we talked about those figures a lot.
Self-protection, isn't it, as much as anything else? Yeah.
So did you feel overall that these kind of modern kind of touchstones or examples helped you kind of breathe life or understand your characters, if that makes sense?
I think the Teresa's character did, because we had a look at her name, Paula White, who was Trump's spiritual advisor. And I years ago spent a lot of time in the States and being in some of these churches with the evangelical Pentecostal type approach. But this was unbelievable, the video that Holly showed us. And I think that gave a lot of life to try to make a link to, how today would a Teresa's figure, you could go for the person who looks at, the crystal ball, kind of looking into that, or somebody who tells you they can hear or listen to the dead.
Like a psychic almost.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a psychic person. But this character was really, very interesting, it's charismatic even. I mean, I'm an atheist, but I don't believe in what she's saying at all, but it's a really charismatic character. And so trying to get some of that into Tiresias, but then also recognise Tiresias totally believes what he's saying. And
But
obviously
also-
he's right, there's an element of what he says does come true. We've seen it in Oedipus.
I think in general the audience can kind of relate to how Greek playwrights have written their pieces, because it is a reflection of the human condition. And everybody knows, or Eurydice, everybody knows an Antigone in their lives. We've seen it on TV. Everybody knows a Creon, like with politicians. Everybody knows a Tiresias with, Pentecostal, evangelical preachers, or, what do they call those people that take money off people and they're religious figures? The Tamaki in Auckland.
Yeah, Bishop
So everybody can relate
set
to all of these
themselves up,
experiences.
yeah.
People, the narcissist, if you're thinking in archetype terms, the narcissist, the hero, the martyr,
Oh, that's a good, very valid point. Yeah, it's about these archetypes that still work for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is basically, although we would love to think that we were so much more evolved than our historical ancestors, we actually, apart from obviously we've got a few more, antibiotics and things available to us, we actually as human beings are fundamental, what makes us who we are as a society. Sadly, we haven't learnt a great deal, and we still seem to be making very similar mistakes and errors of judgment, and backing the wrong person for the wrong reason, or believing in a person for a specific reason or whatever. And it seems to me that there are people who can be persuaded by others, and others have that power over others, whether that be a good thing or a bad thing. And I don't think we have evolved that much.
Which is
ultimately.
why the play.
Which is why it's really great. I mean, it's the same as Shakespearean plays, right? Obviously, the reason why they're great, the reason why the classics work is because they are such well-rounded, reflective plays, and they are something that we should be using.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's a great note to finish on. Thank you so much, guys, for coming in and discussing your wonderful production.